Okay, so I usually don't do intros to podcasts and want them to just kind of speak for themselves. But this Kain interview was pretty special that I thought it deserved one. So first of all, this is exactly why I started Proof of Story, for these kind of discussions. And hopefully you'll agree that this is a pretty unique look at the backstories of some of these characters. Secondly, I'd see Kain as like one, if there's like a Hall of Fame founders, I see Kain as like one of 5 of those. And unfortunately, some of them are not able to comment. So it's hard to to get them. And then the others that are just not willing to open up. And so I really respect that Kain is just willing to open up about the backstory of what was actually going on with Synthetix, up about his personal life and some of his struggles and how his wife like saved his life basically. Um, he also gets into, like what he thinks Ethereum needs to do and what saved Ethereum. It's like really just open up. And I appreciate that. Um, because I think like people see this guy and they make assumptions about who he is. Because, like there's very few of these formats where like, we're just kind of bullshitting and talking and like opening up about what really went on. And so I hope to get more people on like this because I know there's a lot of good stories told behind closed doors. And, like if you're one of those people and willing to open up as well, feel free to reach out and I'd love to have you on. And I hope you enjoyed the interview. So let's go back to Synthetix.
Cool.
So I was thinking about Synthetix. Like, I mean, it was derivatives.
Yep.
You had gold. Like, why is that not the biggest derivative exchange in the world?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the two issues that we had back then were we had all of these like very hard requirements to do with like censorship resistance, decentralization, that made it difficult back then, particularly. And this was like uncompromising ideological hard requirements, right?
That you guys came up like
that we came up with. Yeah, no one imposed them. Like, I mean, you could argue Vitalik maybe imposed them on us, but we really believed, I particularly believed that in order for this stuff to work, it needed to be like credibly neutral, fully decentralized, like DAO governance, all of this stuff. And so we leaned into that stuff so hard. And I think, the early DeFi people who were successful, it was a bit of a psyop because the people who were our audience, the customers for this infrastructure we were building, the smart contracts and stuff, also had drunk the Kool-Aid. Mm-hmm. And so they're like, yes, more of that. Like, we want it. And like when I look back on who was trading on, for example, Quenta back in the day, right? When we launched the Quenta front end, they were not traders. The traders were still on BitMEX at that point.
Yeah.
Right. Like these were ideological people that were like doing something, because BitMEX was no KYC. You didn't like how are we going to compete with the liquidity of BitMEX as a purely decentralized venue, especially back then, right? And then, we went down the L2 path, which seemed like the right scaling thing. And I think,
by the way, there's only so many of those ideological guys to trade. And
that's the problem. We hit a ceiling, right? Like we hit a ceiling.
Actually, I think like the Ethereum and Solana are hitting that same ceiling.
Yeah, like there's only so many people that are willing to crawl over broken glass to use a worse product for like ideological reasons, right?
Not even ideological. Like this is coming up now with Canton. It's also practical. Like, Yuval alleges that, okay, great. Like Ethereum's decentralized, but the minute you have RWA, you have a centralized issuer.
Yeah.
So like, it's like, what are you really getting from all of that cost and delay of decentralization In the end, like your assets can be, your stablecoin can be frozen. And
I
so
mean,
it's just not practical.
people have been talking about this for a long time, right? That like there is no more fork choice rule in Ethereum. Like it's what USDC decides happens, right? Like if there's a hard fork now, if there's like a contentious hard fork, where's the money going to go? It's going to go wherever the RWAs are, right? Like you're kind of locked into this. And, this is the interesting thing about startup life combined with like such a transitional technology, right? There were all of these like assumptions and priors that were brought to the table by all of the people who were building this stuff in 2015, 2016, all the way through, into DeFi Summer, the first 5 years of Ethereum. There are all of these assumptions and you're doing a startup on one hand, whilst this like transitional technology is being built, and you're trying to reason about both of them and the intersection of the two of them. And if any one of the magical things that you were expecting to happen doesn't happen, then you like live in a completely different world than where you thought you were going to live. And that's where we are now.
You can't change it because you're too decentralized and like you don't have control and there's governance. Like, and I think it's one assumption. The one wrong, it's interesting because I think your experience at Synthetix was kind of representative of like every blockchain, which is they assumed that people would pay and wait for decentralization. So they architected these general purpose decentralization chains. And they're like, people, this is going to be prioritized. And every time someone made a more centralized trade-off, the adoption moved there.
It won. Exactly. Yeah. And again, like there were people that were like, no, if you go back to Synthetix, like early governance days, there were long debates, like months long debates about the fact that we needed to get rid of DAI because it was too centralized, because there was USDC as one of the collateral.
Yeah, they changed that, right? Like,
they added USDC. Now, the irony there, right, is we, Maker used to look at
when they added USD, it was a different USDC.
For sure. For sure. But the Maker community used to look at Synthetix and be like, look how centralized they are. They have these like immutable proxy contracts and stuff, right? Like there was a lot of infighting between the two of us. And then they went and added USDC as collateral, and we were like, witches, burn the witch. Like, and there were a lot of like kind of these kind of purity test style games, right? Of like who's more decentralized, right? And
so you're so tired of this conversation because now it's 7 years later and the same conversations are happening.
Well, I don't know that I don't know that they still are. Whoever's still having these conversations is fucking like the Japanese in 1950, like fighting on like it's over, right? Like this is like at least at the application level. I think you can argue at the chain level, what level of kind of centralization, et cetera. The interesting thing about all of this, my hot take is that it was all transitory. Right? Like it was all of these arguments and debates about whether or not we should be this or how this should be is all going to evaporate in the next, call it 3 years, right? And I think the reason why it's going to evaporate is because we will figure out how to do this moon math, zero knowledge stuff, in a way that you don't have the trade-offs anymore, right? All of these trade-offs were like transitional trade-offs as you're building the tech. And I think we will get to an end state in Ethereum, Solana, Fogo, where like you have zero knowledge proofs that allow you to be almost as fast as a centralized service, but with all of the benefits of decentralization. Like that's my hot take is that the unlock that's coming from agentic coding, there used to be like 3 fucking dudes who were smart enough to figure this shit out.
Hold on, we're gonna get to this because this is a whole topic, but I still want to go back to Synthetix.
Sure.
So the other interesting part is, so you had a partner, Jordan, right?
Yeah.
Who's still your partner?
He is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you guys have been together for you're probably like the longest duo in crypto, right? And very different personalities.
10 years. 10 years, I think. Yeah.
Wow. And completely different personalities, right?
Completely different. Very different.
So how do you make that work?
Well, I mean, he moved to Lisbon and I'm in Sydney, so that helps. I think, everything comes down to alignment, right? Like we had good alignment in the Synthetix days. And we've kind of found ways to keep the alignment going. But like anything, there's obviously tension, right? I think like when you have a prop fund with someone, there's going to be judgment calls and things like that are challenging, right? I want to buy more Athena, right? And or whatever the thing is, right? And you have to have a lot of kind of belief in the other person to be able to like weather those issues and mistakes and stuff. But it's not easy, for sure. It's not easy.
Yeah, kudos, man. It's been a long time, and I've enjoyed working with both of you guys. So the other thing before we move on to the future on Synthetix, I kind of remember there being like this level. It was like $3.50, where everybody in crypto was talking about like if SNX went below 350, like Goldman Sachs was going to go out of business. There was like this systemic level.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I guess it didn't go through that level. What was that all about?
No, it did. So I mean, this is something that doesn't really come up very often because I don't think that people understand the implications of it. This is really interesting, right? So, there was a period of time in the very, very early days, like late 2018 into 2019, where we had the stablecoin. The stablecoin existed. It went through a couple of iterations. We had like this EUSD stablecoin, which was ETH backed, right? It was basically Maker. We then switched to the Haven backed stablecoin, and then eventually switched to the SNX backed stablecoin. So what that meant is that the entire edifice of Synthetix was predicated on it being collateralized. And the way that we managed that was by having it, be like a 20% LVR, right? Like you could only borrow 20%. And this went up and down. It went up to 40, went down to 15, but like, bounced around that range, right? About 20%. So there's a lot of buffer there, right? What we didn't anticipate, I think, is that the thing would go 1,000x. Like off the bottom, it went 1,000x. It was 2.8 cents to $28.
Yeah.
Which is wild, right? Like there's not many times in your life you get to sit and write 1,000x, right?
Yeah.
Now the interesting thing is a lot of people have this belief that I was like dumping SNX the entire time, whatever. The irony of this entire thing is that my SNX for 99% of the time from when this happened, right, was fully levered up.
Yeah.
Fully levered up, fully deployed, fully levered up. I could not have sold SNX. I had like a couple of marginal wallets that had like a little bit of SNX there. But it was very hard for me to sell SNX because I had borrowed SUSD against it, right? So I had at one point, I think something like $250 million worth of SUSD debt against my SNX.
Wow.
When it like at the peak, right? Like at the peak, it was like $250 million. And what the other interesting thing was, because of the way the debt pool was structured, you had to hedge your debt. You couldn't just sit there, otherwise you're naked short. Right? Because the debt pool was made up of like synthetic Bitcoin, synthetic Ether, synthetic gold. And so it was your job. And like in the early days, this was like, this is a fine job, right? All of a sudden, you're trying to hedge $100 million with the fucking ETH. And it was a nightmare because like you make a mistake, you're like trying to be delta neutral in that environment is impossible, right? So you're just kind of like directionally hedging yourself. And so the way that I eventually reconciled this for myself was I just said, I'm going to fucking gig along ETH. I don't care. Like, I'm going to take this. Sorry.
Where was ETH at that point?
I mean, this was from like, sub $100.
Yeah.
Right. And so I built up this position, which I had to have, right? Because, the debt pool had collectively, I think, about $1 billion in it, something like that. So the total debt pool was $1 billion, of which I want to say, I was 20% or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was $350 million worth of synthetic ether in that debt pool, right? So ETH doubles, and like at this point, I think like, let's say ETH's at like 2K, right? ETH doubles. All of a sudden, if you aren't hedged against that, it's over for you, right? Like you're done.
Right.
And so this was like horrific on both the upside and downside. Because on one hand, I would be like, all right, I'm going to be overexposed to ETH to protect against this like potential, ETH white swan pumping to 10K or whatever. And then ETH would dump. And I'm overexposed. Now I'm like net long ETH and I've lost like, $20 million, right? Or whatever. And it would just go like this all day long. Like all day long, every day. You wake up.
I'm kind of remembering like you a bit high strung in those days. Now I know why.
Dude, like I would wake up every morning and be like, is it over? Like it could have been a smoking crater on any given morning.
How'd you even sleep?
I could barely sleep. Like genuinely, I barely slept for years, right? Like if I had woken up one day and something had gone wrong, and like when I say something, like this thing was, there were like so many vectors that it could have gone wrong, right? Like I could have easily woken up on any given day and the entire thing is nuked for any number of reasons. It's been hacked. There's an Oracle problem. ETH is dumped. ETH is pumped. Bitcoin's dumped. Bitcoin, like there was just any number of ways that this thing could have unwound.
Yeah, I think about FTX, and this is just based on like public information. I obviously, interacted with SBF like everybody did then. But what people don't talk about is before this happened, like FTX was doing crazy leveraged derivatives.
Yeah.
And Alameda was like the only market maker. And everybody was looking at it like, how the fuck are they even doing this?
How can you be the other side of this? Exactly.
Yeah. How can you be the other side of this? And you can kind of envision him like with this mental model of all this, all right, he's taking losses. Cause there's lots of market makers, like in-house market makers that you start out small, you start taking a loss for the good of the exchange, right?
Yeah.
You get in that model when it's like really small, when you're taking like a 10,000 loss, per day, let's say. And you're like, yeah, but this exchange is growing, FTT is growing, like it's good. And then all of a sudden that loss grows and you're taking
$1 million,
but you're already in that mindset.
Yes.
And he's making some good investments, right? And so he's like, has this mental model where he's like, okay, this is for the good of the exchange. In a situation where I can like, take the gains from my investments and like, make Alameda whole. And next thing you know, it like unwinds. Yeah. And so you can kind of envision like how he got there from kind of just a lack of like risk management. Like even I remember back in like at my FX days, I saw, a couple of people get carded out.
You get people blow up. Like leverage is dangerous, right?
But it was always like, there was a moment where that person could have raised their hand and be like, you know what? Like I just took a loss. I'm going to own it. Like, let's figure out how to get out of it. But like they didn't. No. And they were like too, like for whatever reason, they couldn't just admit that like, oh yeah, I fucked up. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have taken this loss. Like, let's get out of it. And instead they tried to trade around it. And then it gets worse. Or they try to or they put it in like a client account. And all of a sudden it's like wire fraud. And I'm like, dude, if you just raised your hand and was like, I fucked up.
Help me.
Like we would have figured it out, and now it's too late, and now you're, you have an ankle bracelet.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's tough though, right? Because like even with Synthetix, there was like socialized losses, right? Like which is one of the problems, right? There was like a massive principal agent problem, even though I, was 15-20% of the debt pool, right? So
Yep.
I had a really strong bias towards making sure that the debt pool was okay. There was still this like sense of, well, it's growing, it's fine, we can like eat this. And, we lost so much money because the debt pool was the counterparty.
Yeah.
And so the debt pool would eat losses on the downside, it would eat losses on the upside, it would like go sideways, it was eating losses, like, and any Oracle issues, like Oracle manipulation, like the maker manipulator in I want to say late 2019, that was a couple $1 million, which at the time was not nothing. That was like 2% of the debt pool or something, but it was socialized. Everyone's debt went up a little bit. You didn't really see it. You could kind of squint at it and go, like this is okay. The collateral value's gone up a lot. Like it'll be fine. And so, it's really easy in situations like that where you don't have to immediately eat the loss, to kind of go, directionally we're going in the right place, right? And so
Tricky.
yeah.
Before we move on to Infinex, so you had mentioned, like this thing went way up and like you didn't sell any. I was talking to.
Sorry, I should say I sold, and I've tweeted about this, right? So I sold, I think at the peak I had like 40 million SNX, and I sold about 10 million over the course of like 6 years. So about 25% I sold down.
Yeah.
But then, yeah.
But I was talking to founders like you who had these 1,000 X's, and how many people told me, and a lot of them went to near zero.
Yeah.
And how many founders told me like, Rob, I didn't sell like a single coin.
Yeah.
Like I don't know why, like I believed in it, like, yeah. But no one believes that. Like
no one believes it. Exactly. Like, it's funny. Like Kieran, my younger brother, he had Illuvium, and I think he sold like 2% of his stack. Yeah. And everyone's like, you sold everything. And it's like, well, no, like the tokens are still there. I've got a wallet that has 8% of the supply. Like, how did I sell everything? Like, it's right there. You can see it. And they're like, oh, you had secret wallets or whatever. Like, you can't win that game, unfortunately. And I would argue back in the day it was bad, but now it's 10 times worse.
Yeah.
Like 10 times worse. Everyone's been burned by, all of this shit that like no one trusts anything anymore. Like there's zero trust. Like, we used to think that it was like a trustless environment back in the day, but there was a lot of trust. Now there's no trust. Like the trust is completely gone. The problem with that is when there's zero trust, it becomes very PvP. And, if there's no upside for someone in like actually doing the right thing, because when you do the right thing, you get punished anyway, then it's easy for people to get themselves in a headspace where they're like, no, fuck it. This isn't worth it. Like the only way that we get out of that is we have some examples of things that work, right? And Hyperliquid is one, where the thing is making money. Staking makes sense. The only way that, we used to talk about token sinks all the time, right? We didn't realize how precious those token sinks actually were, right? The only way that you can make a token investable is to align incentives so that the people who are actually investing, and there are people who do want to invest long-term, are rewarded for doing that. If there's no reward for holding a token long-term, then why the fuck wouldn't you trade perps?
Yeah.
Just buy 10x leverage. If you think it's a good trade, buy like 10x leverage. Look at Uniswap, right? Uniswap is one of the most diabolical charts in crypto. You had the price is sitting there at whatever it was, $4 or $5 for like years, right? Everyone's waiting for the fee switch. They're like, if the fee switch comes, it's going to go to 20. That was my thesis. I'm like, I was holding spot uni for years, for like 4 or 5 years, right? And I'm like, if the fee switch comes, and eventually it will, eventually we'll have clarity, the fee switch will come, uni reprices to $20. Like that's just like an obvious thing, right? Cut to 2026, it finally happens, but no one holds tokens anymore. And so you actually get this double-edged sword of the people who are long-term holders now are finally like, okay, here's my chance to actually sell. They start taking profit. They were holding this thing, they're bag holding for 5 years. It goes from $5 to $10. They sell a bunch of it, right? But the problem is that the counterparty who's buying it is actually hedging perps. And the perp guys are treating this like a 48-hour trade, maybe max, right? So the perp guys buy a ton of, you know, leveraged uni, right, on Hyperliquid and Binance and Bybit and all these venues, and it pumps to $10, and then they unwind, and the thing ends up the spot token's now at $3. It's fucking wild. Like if you'd said to me that we have a uni fee switch and the price is down 60%, I would have blown my own brains out. Like, it's not possible. There's no way that the market could be that bad. And yet here we are. And so the question is, how do you actually get tokens to be investable again? How do you find people who want to hold tokens long term? I think the only way is you need really strong alignment to you know, create token sinks, that revenue all goes back to the token. You know, there's a bunch of things that need to work, but also the thing needs to be producing revenue as well.
Yeah, there's that detail. So
that's small requirement.
Yeah, got it. All right, so let's talk about Infinex. So do you take any time off before you started Infinex, or?
Yeah, I did. So you asked, why did Synthetix not work, right? So one reason was to decentralize. We were decentralization maxis, and you know, I was one of the core people who designed the like V2 perps, right? Yep. We had V1 perps, which is like a proof of concept, and then V2, there were like 5 of us who were designing that you know, which is hard, like, to design a decentralized perp engine, right? The constraints are brutal. And so V2 was actually pretty good, but there were some issues, right? All of those issues were so tractable if you were just willing to dial the decentralization back like 2%.
And you weren't.
And we were like, fuck you, how dare you suggest that, right? And you know, meanwhile, like, the front end's running on AWS. So the whole thing is nonsense, right? Like, we were just smoking crack. Like, it made no sense, right? We were like, no, that's okay, but this is not. And like, there were all these magical things that we believed. Anyway, so cut to V3. I have at this point lost my mind. It's 2022. I've completely lost my mind, right? Yeah. I have, in my head, I was like, I have just spent the last 7 years, and you know, prior to that, I had multiple startups, right? So you know, the previous startup that I started was 2014.
It was like payments, right?
Payment gateway, that we were like the over-the-counter payment engine for most of the Bitcoin brokerages in Australia. And a bunch of other stuff, like you know, sports wagering companies, etc. People who wanted to pay cash into like digital into apps, basically. So we built this payment gateway. That was a hard startup to run. We had 2,000 locations around the country. People would fucking come in and steal shit, steal money, steal iPads. Like, it was not an easy startup to run, but it was a cakewalk compared to crypto, right? So I'm a battle-hardened founder. Like, this is gonna be okay. And I walk into crypto and just like bullets going everywhere. Like, it was just like an absolute war zone. I still, my favorite quote of that entire era is from Larry from The Block, who's like, we had it like on our wall, right? We had this tweet on our wall for like 5 years. And he was like, I cannot even imagine the stress that DeFi teams go through every day. It's a giant 24/7 bug bounty, basically, for anyone who can come and steal your money, which is true. That's what it was. And so I had 5 years of like, just like absolute max pain. The amount of stress, you know, the amount of stress that we were under, like, genuinely, I would wake up every morning and be like, is it over? That like is the world gone? Like, did we, like, you know, I grew up in the 80s, right? And you know, we would have like these nuclear scares. You know, they trained us to like get under the fucking desks or whatever, like that was going to stop a nuke or something. But like Florida in the 80s, right? Like they were worried we were going to get nuked. I don't know. They, in particular, Florida. I think they thought Florida was like a major target or something, right? So
I was near New York. So I grew up in the 80s near New York, and we never had that.
No, dude, Florida was fucking crazy. Like like we would have like full out drills. And so you know, that was somewhat concerning as a child, right? As an 8-year-old, you're like,
you rolled right into it, man. You haven't had a peaceful period in your life.
No, I really haven't. My whole upbringing was like pretty fucking chaotic as well. Anyway, so get to 2022, and I'm like, I have earned like some fucking respite from this. I want to check out. I don't want to deal with this anymore. I don't want the stress of it. I'm just going to go and fucking get drunk and high and like just party. And that's what I did. I was like, see you guys later. Sorry?
You were single then?
No. I was married. I'd been married for like 8 years. And I was like, listen, I'm going to go around and do conferences. Like this is like the minimal amount of work that I can do. And so I would go from conference to conference. I would get up on stage and like say some bullshit for 20 minutes. And then I'd go and fucking party for 3 days. And it was like, I got to the point where I came back. I've been in New York and I almost died. I had a party in my house in New York, and it was like a 4-day bender, and like legitimately I should have died. Like the amount of drugs that I had in my system at this point. Like I remember waking up, I went to bed at 11 a.m. and I woke up at like 4 p.m. And I remember waking up, and this was like a different kind of existential. And I was like, oh, wow. Like I was a bit confused that I was alive. Like it was actually that crazy. So I got back from New York, and my wife and some of my friends were like, you need to go to rehab. Like this is fucked. Like you can't, this is not okay. Like you're like,
is it an official intervention?
It was not like an official intervention, but we had this like couples therapist that we're seeing who was an addict himself, right? And I kind of respected this
I stopped drinking in 2019, so I'll tell you my story too.
Yeah. So this guy was like I was like, this guy gets it, right? Like this guy gets it. And I remember I got back and my wife was like, we need to go and see this guy. Like, you know, this is not okay. Like what you're doing is like dangerous. Like you're going to die. And I was like, I'm not going to die. Like, what are you talking about? Right. But meanwhile, I was like, yeah, I probably will die. And this guy's like, you need to fucking get to rehab like today. And I was like, holy shit. Like no one had ever said that. Like people had said they're worried about me, but no one had said like, you need to go to rehab immediately. Like get on a fucking plane right now and go to rehab immediately. And somehow this got through to my fucking drug-addled brain. And I was like, okay, sure. Like whatever. I'll go to rehab for a couple of weeks. Like fine. Anyway, I was there for 6 weeks, and like it was literally like week 5.5 where I was like, maybe I do have a bit of a problem here.
Took you that long?
It took that long.
Yeah. But did you go through like a detox like the first 2 days?
Yeah, but you know, the detox didn't even feel that bad. Like like physically. It was mentally that was the painful part. Because I was sitting there in like fucking Arizona, and I'm in this like shack in Arizona, and I'm like, how did I get here? Like in my head, I was like, I won. Like I did the thing as a startup founder. I was like, I finally built a startup that was like so successful that I've won. And, you know, I've got like all of these investments that have made money. I'm like, you know, early stage investor. Like, you know, I backed like some biggest...
me. I'm fun.
Yeah. Like I was like, how this doesn't make sense. How did I? So like mentally, it was really hard for me to like reconcile the fact that in my crazy fucked up head, I had won the game. I was like, I've done all the stuff, right? But I wasn't happy. I was fucking drinking and doing drugs, and I was like, and I remember sitting there being like, this is what I've been trying to do. Like, what am I doing here? And so eventually, after like 6 weeks of rehab, they finally sorted me out.
Nice. And never relapsed?
No.
Do you?
Yeah.
And so they say that when you quit alcohol or give up drugs, you always replace it with something.
Yeah.
So what have you replaced it with?
Well,
Infinite?
so the interesting thing is that, like, I think having been an addict for so long, I I'd gone through so many different drugs, like everything, right? Like, and the thing that had kept me sane for that startup period was like I was addicted to work.
Yeah.
Like I was a work addict. And so that tamped down on like the drugs and alcohol. Like I would occasionally party, I'd like, have like maybe once a month or something like that. I'd like go out and get drunk or whatever. But like I was very focused on work. And that this was the problem, right? Like I got over my work addiction by like being successful enough where I didn't need to work. And then the other addiction, so like that, so the coming out of it, I was like, okay, I need to find a better balanced life. So the first thing that I did was started running, and I got addicted to running, which was
Nice.
helpful. I was
like
running
marathons?
no, I was doing like 5-10Ks, so I would run like 40Ks a week, and so that got me through the first year. Like every time my brain was like on fire, I would just go for a run. I'd go and run 5Ks, 10Ks or whatever. And that really tamped down. It's hard, if you run 10, 15Ks in a day, it's hard to get up to too much trouble.
Yeah. So in 2019, so I didn't get that bad. But I kind of did the math on like the benefits, and like I was single like most of my life. I was in sales, and there's just a culture of drinking, like for both of those things. Like it's kind of weird to be dating and like not drink wine, or like take a client out and not have beers. And so I like just got caught up in that. And then I read this book called This Naked Mind, and it's about a woman who was kind of in the same path. She was in sales, and she breaks down like how alcohol really like affects you, and then how you say like, all right, this is a problem, I'm going to try to moderate, but like it's almost impossible to moderate. So then you don't, and then you feel guilty because you had this plan to moderate, and it becomes a cycle, and you drink more. And this book just like hits home. And one of the things she tells you is like, keep drinking while you're reading this book, so you can like see, like read it while you're having like a hangover anxiety.
Yeah.
And it hit home. I'm like, wow, there's like so many things here that just like make sense. And I just picked a date. That's the other thing. They say like the best way to stop alcohol is just like pick a date. And so I picked a date and like never looked back.
Wow.
And like probably one of my biggest accomplishments is like the people I helped also get sober. There's probably like 5 or 6 people, and all of them like started with this book. Like I gave them this book.
Yeah. Wow.
Like, that's one of they call me like, Rob, I'm at a year now, I'm like,
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I
mean, trying like, helping. It's funny. I had a one, like partner in crime type of thing. Like one of my closest friends, I got out of rehab, and it was my daughter's birthday. So I'd like organized rehab so that I would get back the day before my daughter's birthday. I was like, I didn't want to miss her birthday. So I spent my birthday in rehab. I had the choice of like waiting, and I remember like this was like a week in, it was my birthday, and I was like, it's rehab, you can walk out. And I tried like 3 times while I was in rehab. I was like, fuck you guys, I'm out of here, I'm going.
Did you actually leave and go and come back?
I left. Yeah, I left. I got all the way to the gas station, and my wife called me because they make you call. Actually, funnily enough, they tried to call. So before you leave rehab, there's a contract that you sign that like you will at least tell your like significant other or whoever your person on the outside is or whatever. That person has to be notified before you leave the premises, right? So my wife's in Australia, and these fucking guys in Arizona can't work out how to call international numbers, so they couldn't call her. And this was hilarious, right? Because I'm watching this happen, and I could see them scrambling, and they're panicking, right? Because they're trying to dial the number, it's not working, and I'm like, I'm not gonna fucking help you, and they don't want to tell me that they need help because they don't want me to know that they haven't spoken to her, right? So they're like, yeah, just like 5 more minutes, like what? And I'm like watching them like press random numbers, and it's just not happening for them. And I was like, you fucking pieces of shit, you're not gonna get me. So they go, okay, everything's good, you can go, but we just have one request. And I was like, I'm not doing shit for you. Like, what? Like, I'm out of here, right? And they're like, no, like, we just need you to send a message to your wife just to let her know because she didn't pick up. So, and it was funny. Like, this is 3 weeks in, right? So, as much of a piece of shit as I was, something at that point must have gotten through because I felt the need. Like I said, I would do it, right? And I was like, I felt obligated to do it, and so I get out and I was like, no, I'm not going to send this message. And I went back and forth for like 10 minutes. And eventually I was like, I'll send the message because I know I've got a window where if I can get on a fucking plane fast enough. And it's like, at that point it was like, I think early morning in Australia. And I was like, I've got a 2-hour window where if she doesn't see this message, I can be gone, right? Like flee the country basically. And she called me back like 5 minutes later and we had a long conversation. And eventually I was like, all right, fine, I'll go back. But like, it was hard. It was hard, dude. It was so fucking hard. And like I got to rehab. So I'm on the way there. I land at 6 a.m. because I flew from Sydney, right? So I land at 6 a.m. I land in LAX and I drink a bottle of champagne at 6 a.m. on my way to rehab. And I thought this was totally reasonable and fine. I'm like, I'm about to go to rehab. Like I gotta have like one last drink.
That's
right. Yeah. And so I get there and I'm like, they go, when was the last time you had a drink? And I was like, oh, I had a bottle of wine in the airport an hour ago. And they're like, first of all, like, of course you did, but also what the fuck is wrong with you, right? And they go, okay, we're just gonna breathalyze you. And I blow 0. And they're like, how long ago? And I was like, like an hour and a half. And they were like, okay, come with us. Yeah. Straight to jail. Straight to jail.
Wow. All right, I want to get to Infinex. By the way, so nothing, you don't take anything now? Because I do feel like there's a culture, especially in like Brazil, where I lived part of my life. Like, they have a culture of like mind altering things, right?
Nothing, dude. Like nothing.
You couldn't.
Here's the thing, right? Like I don't take a fucking Valium. Like the strongest thing I take is an aspirin. And I know, so the funniest part about this is like, it took me 4 weeks before I was even willing to acknowledge that maybe I had a drinking problem, right? My issue was drugs. Like I would do crazy fucking drugs, like crazy. I was like taking weird experimental drugs that you never fucking heard of, right? And I was like, I had connections everywhere and I would just like rotate.
I knew you during this period. You hit it pretty well.
Oh yeah. Like you wouldn't have known if you saw me at a conference. You would have thought I was totally lucid and fine. Yeah. I was very good at presenting like that was the danger, right? I could get away with it. And that's also for myself as well. I was like, no, I'm not a drug addict. I'm a drug person. I'm a drug person. It's different. Drug people, like I was like fucking Hunter S. Thompson fan, right? Like I had fucking Quaaludes and like shit, like just, and I was like, no, I know exactly when to take each of these things to get like the best, most fun time. Yeah. And so I would have like all of these combinations of weird shit. But the funniest part was I knew exactly how every single drug worked, their half-lives, how they interacted with each other. But you know what I didn't know? And I was sitting in rehab and they had this like presentation where they showed you the impact of like different drugs on your brain and how long it would take. And like, obviously alcohol is terrible, but like there's, ketamine and all of this shit. They like showed brain scans of people that were like, meth addicts and this and this. And like 3 years later, 8 years later, 20 years later, whatever. And I had this epiphany where I was like, I don't know what the consequences to my brain are. Like I was like, I'm sure there are some consequences. Like in my head, this is my logic, right? I was like, I'm sure there's some consequences to doing drugs, but the cost is, I'm willing to bear the cost. It's fine. And so I just focused all of my time on like what weird combination of drugs I could take and not like what the impact on my brain was. And the fucking impact on my brain was like real bad.
Yeah.
Real bad. And I felt it once I stopped taking drugs. As soon as I stopped taking drugs, that's when I was like, holy shit, my brain was on fire like 24/7 for like a year. The slightest thing would just like fucking trigger me, set me off. Like I would lose my mind. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Because I had no way to numb, like, I would just go straight to drugs, right? Like that was my solution for everything.
Wow. So I'm glad you're doing good now. Yeah, I mean, look, I like telling the story because there's a lot of people struggling with alcohol, drugs, and sometimes all it takes is like hear somebody that like got through it, and because there's a lot of pressure to go the other way.
Yeah.
So
Well, sorry. So that was the thing I was gonna say. Like I like got out of rehab, right? And my closest friend in Australia, I was like, dude, like I need to tell you about this, right? Because I went away and I was like, this is gonna be easy, 2 weeks, like a little, little break. I'll come back out. I'll be right back on my journey, right? And then I said this to him. Like I was like, dude, don't even worry about it, because he was worried. He was like, what if you don't do drugs anymore? What are we gonna do? Like we do drugs together. That's what we do. And I was like, no. It's gonna be fine. So I come back and I was like, holy shit, dude, I'm not gonna do drugs anymore. And he was like, that's bad. And I was like, I know it sounds bad. Like, trust me, I get it. I've just been through this, right? And I tried so hard for like 2 years. I tried so hard. I tried everything with this fucking guy. I was like, please, like, do this. And I could see the path that he was on. And when I was in rehab, like one of my therapists was like, you will be dead in 2 years. Like if you walk out of here. And at that point, they thought I was going to walk out at any moment, right? Like I would just like, my brain would fucking flip out and I would try and escape, right? And they were like, if you walk out of here, you'll be dead in 2 years. Like, mark my words. I've been doing this for a long time. I've seen a lot of fucking addicts. You'll be dead. And I was like, fuck you, motherfucker. You don't know me. I'm not going to be dead. But when I got out, I was like, holy shit, like I would have been dead, right? And so I said to this friend of mine, I'm like, please, like, try. He went to rehab. He left. Like, he tried a couple times and just like never stuck. And like as an addict, you have all these resentments and like crazy fucking shit that you make up in your head. And so we would like, we had a falling out and then and like a year ago now, almost to the day, he died. And like went to fucking Sri Lanka and like turned up and was fucking like, but within 5 minutes had like a bunch of heroin and like fucking benzos and stuff, and just died.
Wow.
So yeah, it's brutal. It's a brutal thing.
Yeah. Last thing I'll say on that, I had a family member like early when I was young, and he was in a like really bad, homeless, like heroin, needles. And he called me up once and he's like, look, man, can I have $5,000 for to go to Mexico and try this ibogaine treatment? And he'd been in and out of rehab. And like, I was kind of like, man, he's called me up before and like I've given him money and it's always a mistake. But I'm like, you know what? I'm going to give it to him. Gave it to him. He takes it, goes to Mexico, does this ibogaine, completely cured, never relapsed again. Like, there's a lot more. Like at that point, like nobody knew about it.
Wow.
And that's when I started like researching psychedelics, ibogaine, ayahuasca, mushrooms.
Crazy.
But yeah, it's like, and it's kind of crazy. It's illegal in the US and it's like has the highest success rate for addicts of recovery. And it's like, it's a crazy experience. It's not at all pleasurable. But yeah, so that was like the first thing I was like, hey, maybe I'll take this I began, but I never got to that point.
Yeah, thankfully.
But anyway, so let's go to, okay, so you get clean, you get into running, and so and I assume like you didn't have to work again after that.
No,
So
no, I could have
how
easily
did you get back into Infinex?
So I felt like, in hindsight, like if I could do it all again, I think what I would have done, I still believed because end of 2022, Synthetix released V3 finally, V3 perp, right?
Yep.
And the guys who designed the V3 perp were like, this is it. This is going to work, right? Like, this is the thing. And so in my head, I was like, well, who the fuck am I to question that? These guys have been working on this for a year. They've launched this new thing. Like, let them cook, right?
Yeah.
Like, who am I to come in and tell them how to do shit or whatever, right? Yeah. And so I was like, I'm just going to stay out of the way of this and let it play out. But I had some concerns, and the next morning, I'm speaking to a fifth, one of the guys who had designed V3, and at this point, it's been 3 months. This is like April, right? It's been 3 months, and I'm like, "How's it going?" And he's like, I'm a bit worried about some of these things. Like, I'm a bit worried about this. I'm a bit worried about scalability, and he was like, I don't know. Like, it's just not going as well as we thought. And they started
V3, like if you were to compare it to another perp stacks, like was it most similar like DYDX or like?
It was a hybrid AMM, not an order book, right? A hybrid AMM that was supposed on chain. Yeah. So it's on Optimism. So there's
I remember you sold me on Optimism. You're like,
dude,
yeah, man, Optimism's gonna be the next thing.
I know. I sold myself on Optimism.
Yeah.
Look, this is one of the interesting things, though, right? It's like if we didn't have Optimism and Arbitrum, I don't know the state of what Ethereum would be in. Genuinely, like Ethereum would be in a far, far worse state if we didn't have any of those L2s. It was a necessary. Well, because
but first of all, how do you measure that TVL on Ethereum?
I would say, like, genuinely activity, right?
Okay.
So that if there hadn't been a relief valve for, like, dude, remember the Synthetix claims at one point, the weekly claims were $500 to claim per transaction.
Wow.
$500 fucking dollars. You needed $10,000 to justify claiming your weekly inflation. That was the break-even point. 10K. And so, that, and it was only getting worse, right? Gas had hit like 500. We were going into like,
yeah, that was true. That's true. Like even stablecoin transfers were ridiculous.
Dude, it would have been, like an ETH transfer would have gotten to the point where, and of course, eventually this would collapse, right? And so here, the problem is that it would become unsustainable. Like my hot take, if you play this out, if there's no L2s, right?
Yeah.
It becomes so expensive to transact on Ethereum that only ETH whales can transact, right? No one wants to buy ETH. The price of ETH eventually has to collapse because of this, right? Because activity is dying, et cetera, et cetera. And so you get to a point where the price will revert to the mean of what people are willing to pay to do a transaction on the network. But the only valve that you had for that was the price of ETH. The price of ETH would have to come down, right? And so ETH would find a new equilibrium at $100 or something, right? Or $50 or $10 or something like that. So if we didn't have that 2-3 year period
Did you choose right when you chose Optimism over Arbitrum?
In the short term, no. In the short term, no. In the long term, I think yes. Like they eventually got base. They eventually reeled it in. We would have been in a much better place if we had chosen Arbitrum early on. Like there's no question. I think Arbitrum was a little bit further ahead. They had, like look at GMX, right? Like GMX did very well from being on Arbitrum. If we were on Arbitrum, they just did a better job of like courting builders and
man. I mean, I don't know much about them, but I'm impressed. Like, I mean, look, Hyperliquid is a success story. They somehow closed Robinhood, even if they paid money. I don't know the details, but like, well done.
Yeah. So anyway, so I think like if there wasn't that that kind of relief valve,
it makes sense.
It would be fucked, It'll be,
Yeah.
but
even though there's like limited success by the L2s, it didn't realize the potential that we thought it was.
you know, like you don't get paid for averting a crisis, right?
Yeah.
No one gets a fucking gold medal for stopping the world from blowing up, usually, right? It's just some guy in a fucking basement somewhere who like stopped the fucking nuke button from hitting, and no one gives
Nobody
a fuck.
knows it.
No one knows. Like, and so you know, I would say the L2s averted a crisis in the Ethereum ecosystem, in the Ethereum ecosystem that would have been existential. Like if that, you know, and of course there was Polygon, there were other, like, so you got to throw Polygon in as well. Even though, you know, the ETH maxis were like, it's a side chain, fuck those guys. Binance, whatever. But all of the collective L2 ecosystem saved Ethereum from itself, gave it time to scale. And so, but, you know, then they became a net negative eventually, right? Once Ethereum actually started to catch up, now it would be far better if the L2s didn't exist for Ethereum. There's no question in my mind. If Vitalik could like hit a button and all of the L2s disappear, and the only real way to deal with this, to be totally honest, is like jack up the price of blob space so much that it forces all of the L2s off into their own chains. That like the nuclear option for Ethereum is like literally price them out of the market, make it so expensive for them to operate that it pushes all the L2s out into their own L1s. And then Ethereum as a chain would be so much better off. Like there's no question in my mind that would be the best outcome for Ethereum. It would be the most bullish thing to happen to Ethereum if they just say,
can they do that? Is there like governance?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, there's a couple, you know, you can't stop people from using block space, right? So L2s would find a way to use other block space for sure. But I think they would hit a breaking point pretty quickly where they just said, fuck it, we're going to run our own chain, especially now. And so this is the other thing, right? That like, you know, we haven't talked about yet that factors into all of this is look at fucking the Gnosis guys just built their own chain. Yesterday they announced it. Like, I'm pretty sure it's fucking Martin and like two dudes built an entire chain in 10 weeks. Not in their own fucking brains. They have superpowers now.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we were talking about this a year ago. We were like, someone needs to build a roll up that is like economically aligned with Ethereum. It can become like the canonical roll up, whatever. My hot take is that's actually worthless. So I'm sorry to tell Koppelman that he's wasted his 10 weeks of grinding. I think it's worthless to actually even invest in canonical L2 now. I think Ethereum, it's better to invest in like Ethereum moon math and solve the zero knowledge stuff and just scale that way. But all of the L2s could turn into L1s in like a month now, because we just have technology now that is like superpowers. You have a couple of good engineers, put them in the room for like a month, they come out with a novel L1, and you can do things that, like, again, a year ago, we were all sitting around going, we need to solve this L2 problem. We need to build like a canonical L2. There were like 20 of the smartest people in Ethereum in this room, way smarter than me. And they all kind of threw their hands up and they're like, it's not going to happen. It's too hard. Yeah. Like, we don't have the money. You'd have to go and raise money to go and do it. And then Koppelman's like, fuck it, I'll vibe code it. Who cares? In 10 weeks. It's insane. And probably, to be totally honest, the first 4 weeks was like fucking around with like older models, and it's really all happened in the last like 2 weeks with like Codex 5.4 or something.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna talk more about that. So V3 Synthetix happened.
Yeah.
You didn't get involved.
I didn't get involved. And I was like, but I want to do something, right? Like I want to, you know, I was unsatisfied with the state of Synthetix. Like, it was very clear that we had not won. You know, we had never been able to get to the point where the venue, the trading venue, the fucking job of the thing, was as good as a centralized alternative. That was the goal. Like, Unequivocally, that was the goal. We had weird requirements and constraints and nonsense that we were dealing with, but we believed that we would eventually develop the technology to compete with a centralized venue and be decentralized. That was the goal.
That's my
it's
goal.
just that we were not willing to compromise on fucking anything, and so we
that's
go around in circles forever and never deliver it, right? And so I was like, okay, that problem is someone else's problem now. That's not my problem. I think what my problem is dealing with the other part of the stack, which is no matter how good of a venue you have, if the interface, if the UX still feels like jank, no one's going to use it. Like, this is a full stack problem, right? So I said, I anoint myself the savior of the top of the stack. I'm going to go and do this top of the stack thing. And I started Infinex to create, this like UX abstraction layer to solve all these problems.
Nice.
And
what's the vision of Infinex?
Well,
like, what is it going to look like here? And
well,
I know you want to get to the AI agentic.
Well, so I think the reason why the agentic stuff is so critical is like the goal of Infinex, the old goal of Infinex, right, was solve crypto UX. But the old world doesn't exist anymore. Like, we are in a transitional phase, right? This is a phase like, fucking early internet, early mobile, early crypto, where this new technology exists and everything has to adapt to it. Every single thing, even the things you go, well, that's not going to be impacted by this. Everything will be impacted by this, right? And this is maybe even bigger than the internet, definitely bigger than mobile, definitely bigger than SaaS. Like, any of these transitional, technology waves that have hit the world, this is bigger, I think. And we're seeing that already. Like, you can't even imagine the implications of having a fucking on tap smart person that lives inside your computer. What do you do with that shit, right? So I think like my realization of the last 6 months is that solving UX, which is still, I think, the most critical problem, the form factor of that solution is going to change. Boris Cherny, the guy who made in Anthropic, the guy who made Claude Code, he has a really good podcast that he did with Y Combinator this week, where he talks about the fact that they're building for the model in 6 months, not the model today. And there's this like presumption of the model capabilities will like 2, 5, 10x in like a 6-month period. And so therefore, a lot of the things that we are doing get invalidated very quickly. But what I don't think will get invalidated is I think that we will live in a world where the form factor that you interact with technology is agentic in some form, right? Now, the really like low rent version of that is it's just a chat box and you're talking to it, but that to me is like not it, right? Like, it's like iPhone skeuomorphism, right? It's like a weird thing of like, oh yeah, let's make it look like felt or something, like, just so that people have some anchoring to the real world or whatever. And it's like, well, no, then eventually you go, that's actually holding us back. Let's just like make it look like fucking panes of glass or whatever they do now. And so I think that at the moment, everyone's like, throw a chat box in there. That's not the solution here. The solution is to rethink how you interact with technology, because you have these smart.
So give me an example with Infinex.
So one of the challenges with Infinex is we have 20 different liquidity sources, right, inside of Switch.
Yeah.
And you start to hit the limits of how many more you can put in, right? For a whole bunch of reasons. When you're building a single like control plane on a thing, the more complexity that sits behind it, you start to hit weird edges of like, how do you show the edge case? Like, we tried to add, we did eventually, we added this, right? But it was fucking pain and suffering. Like, private transactions. How do you put private transactions into the same interface as non-private transactions and make it sensible and not overload the user, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And you know, in an interface, it's almost intractable. The more variations you add, the more complex the interface gets. This is how you end up in pro mode, right? Where you've got like, you know, 50,000 data points that are in front of the user, and only pro users want to see that, right? So then you end up in this weird uncanny valley of you're trying to abstract things away, but people aren't getting the full benefit of it. Agents solve all of this. It all disappears. It just evaporates, because an agent is the interface through which the person is, and you know, it's even a layer deeper, right? As a user, it makes way more sense for you to do a private transaction most of the time, right? There's trade-offs, there's cost trade-offs, time trade-offs, whatever. But provided you're not cost or time sensitive, and the marginal cost is low enough, right? It makes sense to do a private transaction. Why the fuck would you have every transaction public? It's insane, right? So how do you explain that to a user? The trade-off space there. Like, how do you explain to the user doesn't know? Like, all of a sudden you got an interface and you're like flashing up banner ads and shit to explain private trade. It's nonsense, right? An agent can reason about the trade-off space for the user, know the user, and then say, hey, I'm going to do this as a private transaction. Like, don't even worry about it. Don't even worry your pretty little head. It's going to be fine, right? And the user goes, oh, cool, okay. Maybe they ask about it, maybe they don't care, right? But it's the agent's job to abstract away that complexity. And then when you add a new tool, let's say, okay, we've got 3 different private transaction modes, right? Good luck trying to explain that to a user. The trade-off space of like what Zcash versus Houdini swap versus like, you know, Monero or whatever, right? Like 8 hours later, the user's like, just shut up. I want to do a private transaction, right? Now you can display that trade-off space in like multi-dimensional space to an agent, and the agent goes, oh, that one.
Yeah.
Like,
so are you building the APIs for this, for the display, or are you building the actual agents?
So I think, again, this goes back to like build for the agent 6 months from now, right? Not for today. The agents of today are still a bit too dumb to work all this out in real time and balance the user trade-offs. Like, they're like, the smartest agents can do it, but it's very expensive. And so it becomes prohibitively expensive to have Opus like deciding, you know, your $20 ETH transaction, whether it should be private or not, right? Because it's going to cost you $5 for Opus to like reason about that. But Haiku, it costs 2 cents, but it's just like a little bit too dumb, right? And so we're like almost not quite there. And so, you know, in, let's call it 2 generations of models, Haiku's as smart as Opus, and it costs 2 cents, and it can reason about it. And so the goal then is to get out of the way of the agent, assume the agent's smart, assume it can figure it out, and give it access to all of these things, all of these tools, give it a harness where it can have persistent information about the user. So it learns the difference between you and I, what you like, what I like, what the differences are. Some things we do it the same way, some things we do differently for different reasons at different times, right? So you have to give the agent the ability to learn about the user so that it can actually do the thing that the user wants. Give it access to all the tools. And you need to be flexible enough that no matter which agent it is that is the best trade-off of cost, et cetera, that you're routing to that agent in real time, and you know, the system understands the trade-off space of the different agents. So that's like directionally what I think you need to build to solve this problem. And then you need to figure out how do you actually present that to the user. Because that's the downstream of the user. There's a magical agent that's living in a box that's solving all their problems, but the user still wants to see stuff. Right?
Yeah, what'd you do with my money?
Yeah, like what happened, right? Like they want confidence, right? And you know, this is a really interesting thing, because if you've been deeply engaging with agents over a long enough period of time, you have like the arc of history in your mind, right?
Yeah.
I can remember like the old agents, how they used to do shit. They're the old OpenAI 3.1, right? Agent couldn't fucking get a git commit right. In May of 2025, you try and get it to commit, it couldn't commit. It would get it wrong every time. It was just too dumb. And you think like that's such a trivial thing, and then you go, actually, it's not that trivial. Like Git is not like there's a lot of complexity to Git, and it would just get it wrong. It would just configure the commit command every single time, and then it would go, oh, I made a mistake, okay, and then it would fix it. But it like you went through this loop all the time. Didn't matter what you did, you could try and explain it, whatever. And so if you've seen the evolution of these agents over time, the arc of history is like scary.
Well, let's talk about that for trading. So like, if you think about it, the way trading started, you know, they had like voice trading and then click trading. And then there was a point where they started getting kind of these agent-like models, right?
Yeah.
And actually, it's funny because when OpenAI came out, I heard HFT firms be like, yeah, we looked at OpenAI. It's nowhere near like our, what we call machine learning. Like it's not as advanced. But if you think about it, like all that is, and this, they've been doing this for decades now, is they have agents running on coload servers that trade for them. And they have certain parameters and they're learning. They're looking at the successful models. You know, they're running millions of models. They're looking at the successful ones. They're giving them more capital. They're looking at the unsuccessful ones. They're taking them out. And they have this like Darwinian thing. Yeah. And these guys are in the background, like, you know, they're getting data about like how these AI agents are performing. And so actually what's going to happen, like the way I see this playing out is we talk about like the HFT firms with all of this advanced intelligence to build like coload trading models that are out there fucking making a killing. And then the gap between them and the retail guy in his basement right now is so huge. I mean, like the first thing that retail guy needs to do is just have an agent manage like risk responsibly. Like, okay, I want to get in this position and my stop loss, like my like I'm only willing to risk this amount of money.
Take
like
the emotion out.
That right there, just that is 100%. A huge advantage, right? 100%. So like all of a sudden now we have like disciplined traders and people that aren't losing so much capital, and that's like great for us. Okay, so then the next step is like that they start becoming more and more advanced to the point that the AI that guy in his basement has and the trading models, the high frequency trading models, are almost as good as the HFTs. Yeah. And like I used to, you know, I'm the guy that should be like, oh, they'll never get there because like those HFTs are so advanced. But man, they can get pretty damn close. Like
we're getting close.
About, and so okay, so now the user says, all right, like there's a couple different ways the user will enact with these trading models. Like one is just saying like, hey, I want to go long Apple. Yeah. And so like leg into this position for me, you know, in a responsible way. And so, you know, instead of like buying the fucking top, like that AI agent will like look for good levels, look for mean reversion and like leg into it. And now he's like in this position and he's like, okay, and I want to take profits at whatever. And like, that's just kind of done for them. And like every single trader will have that.
But here's the thing. Here's the interesting thing.
Hold on, let me finish. So then the other part is just like, look, I want to take $10,000 of my money, $10,000 of my money, and run an HFT model.
But this is my point, right? Like the HFTs don't say I want a long Apple. They say go and look at the market and come back and tell me. Yeah.
Like, and every person will be armed with that. So the other part of that is it's not conducive for that model. So if you assume that every single person in the world will have thousands of trading bots at their disposal that are almost as good as now and they're learning, right? And they're getting better. Then you think about like, what is the platform that they want to execute on? Somewhere where they have to KYC when they're a fucking bot and they can't KYC? No. Somewhere where the data is private and they don't really know what's going on? No. And actually, when I came into this, I was all about like private trading. And I used to see Jeff from Hyperliquid talk about like how like public trading was actually better. And I was like, a lot of people are like, oh man, you get stop hunted and pension funds don't want to, like show their position. But like the more I see like the games that are played in the centralized world by exchanges, and like even Binance came out and they're like no more manipulation. We're going to be like targeting this. The more I'm kind of leaning to like, let's just make this all public. And the other thing is like, that's what agents can learn on, is like public data. It's like, all right, we know where your stops are. Like have the agent be smarter about like,
Agreed.
Agreed. So I'm all about like, I think the entire world of capital, like retail is now going to become sophisticated traders. And like we and Fogo and our perp stacks, like we're thinking about that. We're like, okay.
So like game this out though, right? Like game this out for me. So everyone is now, and you were there when we went from like one HFT firm to like 100 or whatever, right? And the market got more efficient.
There's still like 10 that are really good, and
there are 10 that are really good, right? Okay, so like Jim Simons or whatever like shows up and like builds like an algo, right? And it's like the market got way more efficient, which is better for the world, right?
More volumes.
And so if every single person has technology for trading that is the equivalent of the state of the art, let's say 5 years ago, right? The absolute bleeding edge state of the art, best hedge funds, HFT firms, whatever. The market has to get more efficient, right? Like that's the only way. Like we have better capital allocation, the market's more efficient. Like that's the only way this plays out, right? Like
it will get more efficient. How does it play out? Like what do the markets look like? What do the number of assets you can trade look like? I don't know about that. What I do know is that like once these firms got intelligence and once there was competition, it became about optimization. And now it's like, I need to be close to price discovery. I need to colo.
So like the guy in the basement.
And so that's what I think we're 6 months ahead with Fogo and now the hub. And I don't know if I told you about the hub, but like what it's evolved to is basically colo optimization as a service. Fogo is going to be an anchor client. Pith will be there. Ambient will be there. Well, there's going to be 7 microseconds between participants in the hub. So we're getting down from like hundreds of milliseconds to microseconds. And all of these people that now have alpha and intelligence, trading intelligence at their fingertips, the next thing is like, I don't want to be delayed and I want to be next to price discovery. So we're going to have these hubs around the world where we're going to pack in all of these performant blockchains. So it's open to anybody, L2, L1, whoever, DEXs, oracles, and all of a sudden that becomes price discovery. And people will want to run their agents like next to that price discovery. And like, I think that's how we win. Like that's how the open public space takes on the Cantons of the world and the permission regulated sexes. Is like we all align, we share services, we become price discovery in an open world where agents can come and execute. So
nice.
That's my vision. Yeah.
All right.
As the front end.
We better wrap up here because I got to stand up and they're gonna kill me. I'm like half an hour late.
Yeah.
So
good conversation, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Do it again.
Yeah, that was awesome. All right, talk soon. See ya.
Bye.